Hi, I'm Susan Culpepper with UGA Extension, and today I wanted to share with you Grandma's Chicken Pot Pie. This is a great recipe. I've tested it and made it healthier, and it's very easy. The reason that Grandma's Chicken Pot Pie could be so important to you is that it could answer the question of what's for dinner. How many days does it come to be 4 o'clock and you're wondering what's for dinner? With a little planning and preparation, you can make 2 or 3 servings of Grandma's Chicken Pot Pie with almost the same amount of time and energy that you would use to make one recipe. So we'll make 2 or 3, you put the extras in the freezer, and they're ready for those busy weeknights when you're in a rush coming home from work, when you've got soccer, baseball, plenty of things to do in this fall and winter season. Let's start with our recipe and look at all the ingredients and make our recipe for Grandma's Chicken Pot Pie. I'm starting with this deeper pan. It's about a 12-inch pan, but you can see it's a little deep and you'll need that to add all the ingredients. So we're warming our pan here, and we have 3 tablespoons of margarine. So that's going to soften in the pan, that's going to melt. And as soon as that melts, we're going to add our onion, and I have pre-chopped about 1/4 cup of onion. Now you can certainly add more onion if you like onion, or you can leave the onion out fully if you don't like onion at all. So this is a versatile and flexible recipe. We'll increase the heat just a bit to let this cook, and it's going to cook lightly or saute in the margarine for about 4 minutes. The onions will be slightly softened. You don't have to brown the onions for this recipe. They'll be slightly softened, the edges will be softer, and you'll see the butter, the margarine cooks down slightly. This is a sweet onion from Vidalia, and we certainly want to use those when they're in season. And thanks to some research actually that happened through the University of Georgia, we're able to preserve and keep those onions year-round so that they can be available to us as consumers throughout the year. So you can hear that onion cooking, and it's just about ready to add the next ingredients, and that's going to be our flour. This is 3 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, and that's about the equivalent amount of flour to the margarine that we started with. So we're going to mix that together. And don't worry if you have a few lumps, there's no problem with that. You can work with that in the next few steps of the recipe. So that's going to be quite thick with the flour that we've added. And the next step is to add our seasonings. Now I've pre-measured these seasonings. We'll let that cook just a bit. I've pre-measured some of our seasonings today, and today we're using sage and thyme, and this is a 1/2 teaspoon of each, sage and thyme. There's a little bit of salt, about 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. Now if you know you don't like sage or thyme, you could substitute for those. Another excellent ingredient with chicken, a spice, is tarragon. So you can substitute tarragon, even poultry seasoning works very well. And that's going to be very thick. And the next ingredient we're going to add is some of our chicken stock or chicken broth. And this is 1½ cups that we have ready today. And we're going to add this slowly. This recipe is a bit healthier. We've started with the margarine instead of butter, so we've saved some calories and some fat and cholesterol there. So we have our margarine, we're also using, once we add this stock, the rest of it, or broth, either one is fine, we're going to add milk, and we're using a lower fat milk, and we're not using whole milk today, we're using 1% milk. 1% milk would be great for this recipe, also skim milk. So we're at a nice point where we can go ahead and add the milk. We'll add that slowly, and eventually we will bring this to a boil, but we'll start it slowly, mixing this together, and that is going to thicken in just a few minutes, and you get a very nice fragrance there with the time. So we're going to incorporate this and increase the heat a bit until it's going to thicken and come to a boil, and we only have 2 more ingredients to add, so this is quite a quick recipe once you get all your ingredients ready. The next ingredient that we will add will be some vegetables. Now there's a lot of flexibility when it comes to vegetables. Today I have these frozen vegetables, and it happens to be a combination of corn, green beans, and peas, and also carrots. This was pre-chopped. It comes in either 12-ounce packages or much larger packages, and this is 4 cups total. But let's say you don't like peas and carrots. You can stick with the corn and green beans, or maybe you're not a fan of green beans in a chicken casserole. That's okay. You can leave those out and just use whichever vegetables you like. So our sauce has thickened, and we're ready to add our vegetables. Now this recipe, it does have quite a bit of vegetables. This is 4 cups. And the reason I've added vegetables or changed that is because, of course, vegetables are very healthy. They have a lot of nutritional value. They have a lot of good vitamins and minerals, and you can use them year-round. These are frozen vegetables, but if you have some leftover corn or green beans in your refrigerator, just feel free to add those and make it work for yourself. So that's starting to thicken up nicely. And our next ingredient after the vegetables, we'll let that cook for just a little bit, and then we're going to add chicken. Now this is chopped chicken. It's 3 cups, which again is quite a bit of chicken, but we're making a whole casserole that's going to serve about 6 people. So this is 3 cups, and this is pre-cooked chicken, and you have a lot of options when it comes to chicken, and it really depends on time and money. To save the most money, I would suggest buying chicken quarters or chicken thighs on the bone and with the skin. You can find sales or find them in large portions, such as I just saw a 10-pound bag of chicken quarters for much less than $10, $6 or $7. And that came to about 70 cents a pound, but that you have to factor in, that does include the bone and the skin, which you would not need. So you can start with the chicken quarters and roast or cook those in water, and then use that water, that seasoned water for cooking your chicken, as the chicken broth for this dish. So that's a tip to double up and save some time and money there. Another option, a much quicker option, but it's going to cost you a bit more money, but if you don't have much time, you might want to consider buying a rotisserie chicken. And one of the smaller rotisserie chickens, when you remove that from the bone and the skin, you do get about 3 cups of chicken. So that's very convenient. Now, of course, you can buy boneless, skinless chicken breasts. You can buy them on sale. So I'd suggest balancing your time and money and cooking a bit of extra chicken when you're doing this. One of the tips for freezer meal planning is to cook, say you're going to roast your own chickens, which could be a great buy at about $1 a pound or less. You can cook 2 or 3 of those in the oven at the same time. You could have one for dinner that night or for sandwiches, and the other 1 or 2 chickens, you use that for your extra meat for other recipes, such as a chicken pot pie, a white chicken chili, or some other type of chicken and rice casserole. So there are lots of tips with chicken. It's very economical, and you can cook a lot at one time and really make the most of your time and energy. So this is thickening very nicely, and now we've added all of our ingredients, and our next step will be to put all of these ingredients, our chicken mixture, into our dish. This is about a 2.5 quart casserole dish. It's the perfect size for this recipe. But instead of just putting the ingredients right into the dish, we're going to add a little trick. We're going to start with heavy-duty aluminum foil. And we're going to line the pan, and that will make it easy to freeze and then thaw the dish for later. So I'm going to measure our size of foil. And because this is a narrower foil, I'm going to cut 2 pieces, and then we'll fold these together. Going to make a nice seam here on the edge. Another great thing about freezer meals is you can get your family to help. So when you're planning these recipes and you're putting them in the dish after you've cooked it, you could get your kids or your spouse to help with this step. So we have a nice seam there. And now we're going to line this dish. So because we're lining the dish, there's no need to spray it with any type of oil or margarine. We're going to press this into the dish very nicely so that we can add all of our ingredients. We have plenty over the edges, and that's very important so that we can wrap it up and make a nice seam. So next we're going to pour our casserole into this prepared dish. So we have our chicken mixture ready to go into the dish, and this can be a little awkward. I'm just going to pour it in. You can see it's still a bit warm, and that's okay. Get all of those ingredients out of the pan and even that out with the liquid and the dry mixture. You can see it's very pretty. We have our corn, our green beans, our carrots. This is wonderful for the fall or winter. You can really get a head start on the holiday season by preparing a few casseroles, soups or stews, and add those to your freezer, and those are great on the cold days. So next we're going to seal up our ingredients. So you have to work with the foil. Let's bring these long edges together first. And we're going to make these top edges meet and fold that 2 or 3 times. We're going to go all the way down the foil, and then we'll fold it over again and again until we have a nice seam. We'll even that out into the dish. And now we're ready to fold the ends just like you're wrapping a present. You can fold that in. If you have a lot of extra, you can certainly trim that off. So we're going to make that neat. Again, we're trying not to rip the foil. If you do, you can make 2 layers. That's no problem. Let's fold this over, and that's nice and neatly done and almost ready to go into the freezer. But one tip that I've found especially helpful is to create a label that tells you what's inside of this dish and even how to cook it for the person that's bringing it out of the refrigerator or freezer. So we've made a label with the title, with the instructions, telling us to bake at 350 degrees for 40 or 50 minutes. I've added the date in case I forget. I want to keep these in the freezer for about 3 months, but they might not last that long. It also has 6 servings, and I've placed that on the label too. So that's a trick that will really serve you well. Now the next thing is we leave this in the glass dish, and we can put this straight into the freezer. So we'll add it to the freezer until it's completely frozen, and then when it's frozen solid, we can lift the foil out of the glass dish, put the foil, the frozen dish, back in the freezer, and we can stack those and have a very neat freezer, and we save our glass dish for cooking in the meantime. So we have our grandma's chicken pot pie. It's come out of the freezer, but it's still frozen. We're going to remove the foil while it's still frozen and add it back to our casserole dish. Then we'll thaw it for about 24 hours in the refrigerator before we bake it. So now we have our thawed casserole ready in the dish. But before we pop it in the oven, we have another interesting thing to add, and that is our cornbread topping. And today, to save time, we're not making homemade cornbread. You're welcome to, but to save time, we're using a cornbread mix. These types in the bag are fine, and I actually prefer them over some of the boxed mixes because the boxed mixes have more sugar, and I don't think that flavor really adds to the casserole. This is very simple. We have our 1 package of cornbread mix and 3/4 of a cup of water. So we'll just mix this together, let it sit just a few minutes, and then add it to the topping. It's unusual for many chicken pot pies to have a cornbread topping, but this is a very nice topping. You know, a lot of pot pies have a flakier dough type crust, which is great, but for a freezer meal, this cornbread topping works very well. So we'll add this at the very end before it goes into the oven. You can start preheating your oven at 350 degrees. So that's about all it takes for a cornbread mix. We'll pour this over the top. So this will spread as it bakes. And that is the next step before it goes into the oven. So our casserole is almost ready. Let's bring it out of the oven and take a look. As it bakes, the topping will turn slightly brown, and it spreads very nicely, and it's a very pretty dish to serve to your family. As a side, a nice green salad works great with this. It's quick and easy, or you could add some squash. Red bell pepper also makes a pretty side with it. Let's review a few of our strategies and some of the benefits for freezer meal planning. When you're thinking about freezer meal planning, don't get overwhelmed. There's some folks that do very well with cooking 1 or 2 days a month, for instance a weekend, and they make 30 meals at one time. That's great, but you don't have to start that way. You might want to start looking through your recipe box and finding favorite recipes. If you have a favorite soup, or stew, or chili, that's a great place to start. If you have a favorite casserole, that's another great place to start. So then in the next step, after you pick your menus, is you want to plan ahead. You want to maximize your savings by using coupons or grocery store flyers to decide where are the best deals. So you want to plan ahead and do your shopping to save money. Then you want to gather all your ingredients and organize your kitchen so you can be most efficient with your time. Remember, make 2 or 3 meals together. Another tip is to combine your work. If you're chopping onions for 3 different recipes, chop them all at the same time. Then if you have green peppers, you might need a 1/2 cup for a certain recipe, 2 cups for another. Chop all of those at the same time to save yourself time and energy. And then another step is to think about how you're going to freeze your meals. You can use the aluminum foil method to line the dish as we did today, but some other tips that you need to know is that you might want to buy freezer containers that are made for freezing. If you use leftover containers such as butter or margarine dishes, those tend to crack and they don't last as long. So investing or waiting for a sale, buy one, get one, is often something you could find for these freezer containers is a great tip. You can also find some casserole dishes. You can use these. These are disposable pans, but they're very practical and not extremely expensive. You can use these disposable pans. They work very well. And you can also find glass dishes which serve, you can freeze in those and they go right from the freezer to the microwave or to the oven. And you can find those at great deals also. Freezer bags are another great thing you can use to freeze soups or stews. So those are very important, and do choose the freezer bags and not just the food storage bags. The freezer bags are going to be thicker and they're going to make your food last at a better quality for a longer period of time. So with a little planning and preparation, you can make 2 or 3 meals in the time that you would cook just 1 meal. Store your extra in the freezer, and then it's available for you and your family just when you need it. Thanks for joining me today. For a copy of today's recipe, you can visit UGA Extension/Paulding. Also, I'd love for you to email me. Tell me if you made the recipe and what you think of it, and if you'd like some other similar, easy freezer meal recipes.